want the American people to know is that we are taking every possible step to keep our homeland safe.
High alert for holiday travel. Americans enter the holiday season feeling the threat of terror.
See something, say something. The call goes out for increased vigilance. Is it temporary, or is this the new normal?
Cubans stuck in Costa Rica. The numbers swell at the Costa Rica border with Nicaragua. How will this refugee crisis be resolved?
Good morning and welcome. So great to be with you on this holiday weekend. A holiday focus, no doubt, on gratitude and blessings, but this year on public safety and security as well. And
that is where we begin today. How vulnerable are we in South Florida to any kind of terrorist attack? What are the local police doing to ensure our safety? And are local police efforts coordinating efforts with federal police agencies? From police presence at the airports to security staffing at malls, public events, sporting events, there is a heightened vigilance here, even with no specific threats targeting South Florida sites.
South Florida's top local law enforcers are with us today. Scott Israel is the sheriff of Broward County, elected in 2012 after 30 years in law enforcement.
And Miami-Dade Police veteran Juan Perez is now the acting director of the Miami-Dade Police Department, the largest in Miami-Dade, with they're budgeted for about 2,900 police officers, but Director Perez, you say you're down to about 2,600 right now. Need to recruit some.
Somewhere in the middle, 2,600, and we have an aggressive hiring plan right now. So we have some academies in place. Good. And next year will be a very robust hiring efforts by us.
All right. Well, that is good to hear. Hey, Sheriff Israel, let me begin with you and simply ask you. I think it's safe to say, I'll speak for myself. I think that if I were traveling this holiday weekend, and today is a huge travel day, I would be just a little bit jittery, maybe on edge in the wake of what happened in Paris November 13th. What about you? Do you feel that? Do you hear people telling you that?
I do. Thankfully, I know a lot more than the average citizen, so to speak. And
that's why you're here.
I was just going to say that.
And as your introduction said, there are no known credible threats in South Florida. So we're in a good place right now, but things could change tomorrow. The most important thing from a vigilance standpoint on the law enforcement side is that two areas, that local, state, and federal continue to be vigilant as far as a collaborative effort goes, as far as our training together, real scenarios, and the sharing of intelligence. There's nothing more important than those two areas.
So how different then is that right now, 2 weeks after Paris happened, than it was before? Because it seems like every time there is an attack anywhere in the world, everyone is on a heightened alert, and what goes on in security behind the scenes maybe is raised as well. But is there a difference than every other day, seeing as there is no specified threat? Is there a difference?
Yeah, Glenna, that's a great comment, and I'd say there is. It's kind of like a football game. If you watch a football game and there's a holding penalty, you don't see two holds in a row because everybody's alerted to it and they're not going to hold on the second play. So we get that enthusiasm again, and when we start to be more vigilant. We're all over social media telling our community, you stay on social media, see something, say something, help us out. So I think there is that added vigilance. And I know intra-agency at BSO, we're doing the things Michael said. We're beefing up security at airports, at the port, and our guys are just on top of things.
Yeah, you know, Director Perez, I have been to MIA in the last week or so, and frankly, it's reassuring. You see officers all over, uniformed Miami-Dade officers throughout the airport, and they're there with, I don't know if they AR-15s or, right. Yeah, long guns, and there's semi-automatic weapons, strong weapons, in addition to
big, scary weapons.
In addition to their pistols, and it certainly is sending a message. I guess the question sort of is a corollary to what Glenna just asked. How long? I mean, you've staffed up at MIA, I guess Port of Miami too. How long can you continue to have more of your officers on duty?
Well, the port and at the airport, those are two locations that I have my least concerns with because they're on automatic. Those personnel that are there, they're always there. So we may make them more visible at times, we may not. It depends, when something happens. Obviously, we want to create that sense of, for the travelers to feel a little safer than they normally are. But the port and the airport, they're always on top of their game. They, and the sheriff mentioned that, and he's on target. Those are the locations that we feel most comfortable with, because we have the staffing there, we have them well trained, and they always have an extra layer of protection at those locations, because we know they're very attractive targets because of the number of patrons that go through there, a number of visitors that come through those locations. That's where someone can do the most damage at any given time and truly paralyze our economy in South Florida. So we always are guarded at those locations. The soft targets, the malls, the theaters, those are the locations that we kind of worry the most about, and that's truly where we need to detect, something to be able to prevent it.
Okay, well, that said then, in practical terms, how do you do that? What's being done right now to protect South Florida's soft targets that are packed this weekend?
Well, you have obviously the intelligence community, the law enforcement agencies down here in South Florida, and I know BSO does the same as us. We have a great relationship with the FBI and the other federal agencies. We're both members of the same task forces to address these situations. However, where it's key for us to be able to succeed is to get the community involvement, to be able to use that slogan, that catchphrase, right, that we all hear about.
Say something.
Absolutely, and that's a national slogan. It's nothing local, and that just shows how we're collaborating with the federal government.
Scott Israel, I have to say that maybe, you encourage, you and Director Perez, all law enforcement, see something, say something. You had an incident at the Fort Lauderdale airport, about a week or so ago, where a girl on a plane thought she overheard one man who was talking on a cell phone before the Spirit flight left say something that she thought was menacing, maybe talking about an act of terror bringing down the plane. And the plane then took off, but then turned around and came back down. And it caused a huge, there was nothing to it apparently, but it caused a huge inconvenience. And one man, a recently naturalized citizen from Israel, was arrested, held questioned for 5 hours or something. So there is a downside occasionally to see something, say something, isn't there?
There really is, but when you live in a free society, thank God we do, these are just things that, that you have to deal with. That's
the price you pay?
That's the price you pay. On the other hand, if she didn't say something and it was a very real threat, or it was a terrorist act, and then we have hundreds of people perish and a plane and what have you. So you have to encourage people to keep, see something, say something. We just got to be vigilant.
And have you seen an increase in people saying something in the last couple of weeks?
Yes, absolutely. We're at BSO, we're members of the NOC, which is the National Operations Center. We're one of 6 local law enforcement agencies throughout the country, and every 5 weeks I send somebody up full-time.
To be trained?
No, they work the National Operations Center.
Sent to Washington.
To Washington, D.C., and then Dade County. We go 5, 5, and 5. Dade County, Palm Beach, and us. And we rotate it around, so we're permanent members. So we know what's going on internationally, nationally, statewide, through the Joint Terrorism Task Force that we're on with the FBI and locally.
Director, I thought that it was just kind of a stunning moment when it was determined that the bomb in Egypt at Sharm el-Sheikh airport that was on this Russian passenger plane, that they pretty much suspect that it was an airport ramp worker, somebody with access to the plane, who put that bomb on the plane. So here you've got your uniformed officers, as you do in Fort Lauderdale, who are visible in the concourse, but down below in the guts of the airport, you've got some people who are not checked as thoroughly as they might be, aren't there?
Well, I don't believe that they're not checked. I mean, I think behind the scenes, the airport has measures in place to prevent things like this. So when we may see that in another country, but here in our airports, I know that there's efforts in place by the federal government to try and detect these type of activities and to prevent that. So I trust the system the way that it is now. And you see, we haven't had an attack like that in the United States, and God willing, we won't. So.
I read something that Miami International and Orlando International are the only airports in the country that every day check employees through the same kind of security that everyone else goes through, rather than giving them an all-access pass. Is that true for Fort Lauderdale? Does Fort Lauderdale not have a daily check on employees for the airport?
I'm actually not sure about that.
Can we check on that?
We can check on that, but you know, the one thing that I will say is there are obviously some things that the director and I cannot talk about, some of the successes we've had.
We understand.
And I know, yeah, clearly, and we get briefed once a year, and I would say this to all the viewers today: if the viewers knew the successes that we've had internationally, nationally, and locally in some of the things we're doing, the viewers would be very proud of local law enforcement, the military, and the FBI and the people working the task force. We've been very successful.
Scott, we're very grateful for your successes and Director Perez, and keep them up. So hold on, we've got more questions for our local law enforcement chief. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
Welcome back. We are talking security, Homeland Security locally with Broward Sheriff Scott Israel, Miami-Dade's Acting Police Director Juan Perez. And if you were with us just before the break, we were talking about people who work at the airports, who get the IDs, who are checked every day at Miami International. We were wondering if that was the case in Fort Lauderdale, at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International. We have Deputy Brian Conroy behind the scenes who got us the answer.
Sure did.
And the answer is that they're not. And is that concerning to you?
It's something I'll discuss with the airport director, but as Deputy Conroy said, they do extensive background checks, and they're, you know, I hope they're confident that the people they're getting, and you know, the proof's in the pudding. We haven't had any incidents out there, so I would say right now, whatever they're doing, they're probably doing a good job because we haven't had the incidents, but it is something that I'll raise this week.
Especially in light of, as you were talking about, the Sharm el-Sheikh incident. Yeah.
Juan Perez, let me just ask you, and Scott Israel, I want your reaction too. I think that we all, we have seen for years, certainly after 9/11, but before that with the American embassies in Africa and, well, the Beirut Marine barracks bombing of years ago, I mean, and the USS Cole, we have seen terror attacks on Americans abroad.
Yes.
And then in this country. But what happened in Paris, I have to say, I see as a game changer, because the very essence of Western civilization, I mean, the ability to go to a soccer stadium, to sit in a restaurant with your friends, have a meal, have a drink, to be in public, and then just be shot randomly by jihadists. I mean, what did you think when you saw this?
What I thought, I can't speak openly like this on TV, but yes, I was upset, angry at what I saw. But let's not forget that attacks have happened. It's just, this is probably the most serious one on the Western society. We had attacks in Canada. You know, we had some other smaller attacks in France. We had the Boston Marathon attacks here in our country. So when something like that happens, you know, again, it's key to prevent it, to detect it before it happens. Once it takes place, we're going to take care of it. We're going to come, both agencies have to, and we're going to continue. We're talking, Glenna, we're talking earlier, we're going to continue to come. We're going to continue to come until we address it, until we neutralize the problem. But the key is stopping it before it happens. And certainly, you know, it's concerning to me as well. I go out and I'm always looking at, you know, these situations. But we need to take these moments and always remember them, so that we're always in a state of vigilance as community members. Me as a citizen, father of two, husband, I want to be in a sense of vigilance when I go out to prevent these situations, and that's what I ask from the community, to do the same thing.
Can we talk about that in practical terms? You're a police officer, you're trained to be vigilant. Someone's at the mall, someone's at the movie theater. The woman on the plane, everyone's vigilant when they're on the plane now these days.
Right.
But when you're going into the mall to buy your presents, or you're going in for the movie and you're in a filled theater, what does that mean, be vigilant? How does someone notice something awry in a situation like that?
Well, Michael made a great point. It is a game changer, clearly. It's not arguable. What happened in Paris was a game changer. But in law enforcement, we understand that people that do these things, they're not always, ISIL might hang up the phone on, they call on these people, but they're all on the internet. The terrorists recruit on the internet. They recruit through Facebook. They recruit through, Twitter and things like that. So how we can be vigilant, pay attention to what's
Online.
going on
Yeah.
online,
Well,
on social media. That's the key.
Sheriff, to that point, let me ask you, do you have an intelligence unit or people who are going online all the time, reading social media sites and looking for activity that is suspicious?
24/7. We have a Homeland Security division within BSO. Now, they do work with all the task force that we've spoken about today, but they're constantly monitoring social media. They have civilians, let's call them informants, if you will, or people that provide us with intelligence that monitor social media and feed us keywords, key phrases, and things we need to do to stay vigilant. But to walk in a mall and ask a mom with 3 kids to be vigilant, that's not going to happen. You're right.
She's already vigilant, and it involves the 3 kids. Right?
And what about Miami-Dade police? I mean, you also have people who are monitoring social media sites and looking for activity that is either, I mean, it could be identity theft, or it could be pornography, it could, or terrorist activity.
We also have a Homeland Security component in our agency, the Homeland Security Bureau. Aside from that, we run the Fusion Center for our region in the Southeast Florida region. So that Fusion Center operates as a hub of information, intelligence information that connects with 70 other Fusion Centers and the NOC that we spoke about earlier. And that's how we feed officers information, and that's basically the center of operations for intelligence that comes in, you know, with anything related to terrorism.
So how mindful are you, or not, about profiling and people's reaction to profiling? And is that done?
Well, racial profiling, for example, is against the law, and it cannot be done. But, for example, if you had, God forbid, a shooting at a school, and people were leaving the school, real intelligence tells us that most people that do these type of horrific activities, mass killings, are white males between the ages of 17 and 25. So you would profile white males between the ages of 17 and 25 that were in or about the campus or leaving the campus. I mean, if real data tells you a certain person or a certain person would have characteristics or be part of a group, it's okay to profile, but you can't racially profile based on a religion or a belief.
But that's after the fact. What about
Right.
before the fact?
We don't do it.
Okay.
And neither does MDPD?
What we want to do is profile based on behavior, and that's the important thing, and that's what the people at the airport, the officers at the airport, at the port, you know, when you make decisions whether to stop somebody or not, to question somebody, it's based on a behavior. And that's the best way, the best approach. You're never going to tell who's who, especially, you know, you've seen the extremes. You saw what happened in Colorado Springs. That was a Anglo male. You see what happened in France. That was, you know, Arabic males. There's extremes and everything. So what we want to focus on is behavior, what the activity is, because we're going to treat an active shooter and a terrorist act the same. You know.
Great advice.
All right.
Great advice.
Director
Thanks so
Juan
much.
Perez, thanks for coming in. We
Thank you very
appreciate it.
much.
Sheriff Israel, always good to have you come
Always
in.
good to be here.
Thank you very much. All right, up next, the race against time. New travel rules may keep Cubans from heading toward a growing migrant crisis in Central America. It is just one of the topics, and there are many that we're going to take up with the Roundtable.
Welcome back. A short work week for the holiday brought no shortage of news to take to this week's Roundtable.
And here are the members of the Roundtable this morning. That face you recognize, Katie Fang, veteran South Florida attorney, former prosecutor, and go-to broadcast analyst. Nancy Ann Crum, editorial page editor of the Miami Herald. We are glad to welcome Nancy back to the Roundtable. And also welcoming back Mike Mayo, columnist for the Sun Sentinel, man of many parts, takes on all kinds of topics from sports to politics, and is about to run a half marathon. We're proud of you.
I'm exhausted already.
All right, Katie, let's begin with what we were talking about with these two local law enforcement leaders, and that is our sense of unease, of being jittery in the wake of what happened in Paris. Are you reassured by what you heard these gentlemen say?
I am. It's an impressive presentation by Metro-Dade Police and by BSO, Broward Sheriff's Office. But most importantly, I was noting the other day, I have a 13-month-old daughter, and it is sad commentary that this day and age I have to worry about something as innocuous or as innocent as going to have a piece of pizza or sitting outside and having an ice cream. Right. But there comes a time when you can't let the paranoia overrun your life, and you got to live your life, and you have to hope that law enforcement is stepping up and doing exactly what they're doing, which is being vigilant about potential threats. But we have to make sure that we're aware both domestically and internationally as to what's going on.
Right. Anyone more aware? Are you even more aware?
Here's the thing. I mean, we try to say that like, this is something new, but the fact is, yeah, maybe the different threats changed through the years, but I remember being a college student abroad in London back in 1986. And at that time, the IRA had an active bombing campaign in London, and the American Express office, where I went to cash my checks back in the days before there was electronic ATMs, was blown up in the middle of the night. And it was a little jarring, but again, you live your life, you hope that the security people are getting their intelligence right and that know what could be coming. But the bottom line is, with soft targets in an open, pluralistic society, something can happen. And it's just a matter of, I'm actually concerned in this state, there's so many prevalence of weapons, and now that we have legislators talking about open carry, see something, say something. If I see a guy walking down the street with a rifle, I want to say something, and they're going to say, no, that's legal, we can't do anything about that.
Right, exactly. You know, I think the truth is we are catching up with the rest of the world. And you mentioned London, and any number of Middle Eastern countries, any number of African countries have seen this kind of terrorism, this kind of violence. Right? Right, it's a way of life. It is their normal. For us, it's unfortunately becoming our new normal.
We are living how Israel and Israelis are living now. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, since Nancy raised it, I'm glad you did, because I wanted to get there. Glenna and I had it on our list of topics.
So glad to be a fellow.
And that is, well, that's why you're here, because you're good at this. But the open carry and campus carry bills that have gone through, I think they've moved through almost all their committee hearings in Tallahassee, which means, Mike, when the legislature convenes in January, I think probably some of the first bills to be heard are going to be campus carry, having guns legally on state college and university campuses, and its companion, which is being able to wear them openly.
It's disconcerting to me because, you know, a college campus, you know, there's so much that can go wrong in terms of people who are, you know, partying, people who are depressed, and all these things. Is it the right atmosphere for a gun?
It's a stormy time for young people.
I don't know, but the thing is, does the Second Amendment apply everywhere? So you can have that argument. Now, as far as, you know, the NRA people will say, well, when there's a mass shooting, the best way to stop the bad guy with the gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, in Paris has strict gun control, so there was nobody sitting there with a concealed weapon that was able to cut these guys down. Would, if a situation like that happened here, would it be possible? Would it be more readily stopped? I don't know, but I don't think the answer is more guns, because it just brings more violence and more complications.
And law enforcement is just dead set against it. The sheriff's associations, the police associations, if they are storming into a situation on campus, they need to know which guy with the gun is the good guy
versus the good guy.
Exactly,
Sure.
exactly.
And every state university president and the faculty associations, they are against this. They say, we need to prevent guns on campus. It's not a good idea.
But they're one stop away, though. Both bills are one stop away from actually becoming signed into law in Florida. Right. And Florida is only one of 5 states that remains anti-open carry. So what does that suggest about the other states in the United States? Are they all wrong? I don't know if you can make a fact-specific analysis every time. I think you need to ask your legislatures to make a decision, hopefully based upon founded, credible data points. And right now, people are voting, and they're voting in favor in terms of Tallahassee to make these bills law.
You know, there's one bill that has not gotten a vote, one gun bill that has gone nowhere, and that would make it okay to carry guns into the state capitol.
I was just going to make that point, Glenna.
Right.
The irony is, if it's okay for everybody else to have guns in their environments and workplaces, how come what's good for the goose isn't good for the ganders?
Well, we're special.
I think that's a huge question.
Well, if you ask Trump, he's 100% for the Second Amendment, as he just said in Sarasota. So there's at least one Republican candidate who's so pro-Second Amendment, he's made it perfectly clear that
He
that's
said a lot of things in Sarasota. Didn't he?
Yeah, he needs to. Yeah.
All right. Boy, you all are leading the conversation. I'll be a participant. You be the moderator. But let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump. The new figure shows that in Florida, it's Trump way ahead with 32% support. And, you know, for those of us, and I'm going to say something later at the end, a little commentary, for all of us who thought it was a summer romance that was going to go away, boy, how wrong were we?
Very, very wrong. And the most disturbing part is the leader of this person wants to be the leader of the free world and is preaching hostility and hatred and xenophobia.
But he's selling out.
And
everybody's coming. It's standing room only. So what does that say about us?
Absolutely.
That's the more disturbing thing. It's not what he
Absolutely.
says, is that no matter what he says, no matter who he offends, his support does not erode, it actually gets bigger. So what does that say? It's a little bit scary moment.
Somebody needs to call him out because he's running out of people to alienate, and he's eventually going to come to a point in time where he needs to own up to what he's saying.
He's insulted John McCain. He's insulted Mexicans. He's insulted Muslims.
The disabled
he's
New York
insulted
Times
the
reporter,
disabled. But it keeps. So I don't know what
he encouraged the beating up of a black protester. You know, it's not so much that someone needs to call him out. The other candidates in his race need to call him out.
John Kasich and Jeb Bush,
Absolutely.
To their credit, have said this is racist, this is fascist, and yet they haven't.
Well, you know what they need to start doing is dropping out so that there can be more mainstream, moderate Republican candidates out there that would get more support than Trump, because that's what you're seeing.
Well,
you
wait,
got him.
You want some sacrificial lamb?
I don't know who, but I'm saying let's be realistic. The people should be looking at the polls and say who's got a chance and who hasn't, so that instead of being 7 viable alternatives, there's only 3.
Just got a
Huge
big endorsement.
Nice little boost.
I don't know.
And he's at the bottom of the pack right now.
So I don't know.
Well, he was at the bottom until what happened in Paris, because he was the U.S. attorney. He's a tough guy. His standing has gone up in the wake of these terrorist incidents.
Exactly.
Shall we take a little break? Stay with us. We'll be right back. We are back with the roundtable. Katie Fang, Nancy Ankrum, and Mike Mayo with us. And before we sort of move on from the candidates, I just want to talk a little bit about the horrific Planned Parenthood shooting in Colorado Springs. You know, this morning we're hearing that the shooter was mentioning baby parts. I'm not sure if that's confirmed or not, but that's what the news is this morning. But have you heard any of the candidates address the shooting in Colorado Springs like they addressed the terrorism in Paris?
Well, as a matter of fact, I did hear Dr. Ben Carson on the CBS weekly show this morning. He was talking from Jordan, where he's visiting, and he was asked, you know, did the whole situation, the video, did this inflame? And he said, yes, that rhetoric does have effects and sometimes exacerbates the situation. So give him credit for at least, you know, he did answer the question.
But where is the condemnation, is my question.
Well, as of last night, I think only John Kasich and Ted Cruz had tweeted their condolences to the victims of the family, but there were no there's no underlying addressing
They're
of
trying to
the
avoid
rhetoric.
You can't politicize 3 people being murdered, one of whom's law enforcement. I mean, you can't come down on this line. What you need to do is express your sympathies, and then Planned Parenthood's always going to be a trigger point, no pun intended, right? It's going to be a hot button topic.
But it was certainly politicized prior to.
Exactly, but you have to avoid that now, though.
No, they don't have. I mean, you can politicize it.
But it shouldn't
things
be.
are politicized all the time. And then, you know, what did we hear after the Paris attacks? Oh, it's time to shut down some mosques and time to register register Muslims? Is anybody going around, you know? But when it's homegrown terrorism, and this was an act of terrorism, shopping
Domestic,
center, planned,
yeah.
Right.
and again, now we're going to try to say it's going to be, oh, it's just a lone wolf, a man with mental problems.
Right.
But you know, he had some political views, and he was religious. He was raised Baptist. He read the Bible. Do we hear anybody talking about, you know, shutting down churches or registering Christians? No, because that's an absurd overreaction and paints too broad a brush. But again, the dichotomy in reactions is interesting.
All right, let's move on, if we can, to the situation with roughly, 3,000 Cuban migrants are stuck in Costa Rica. There's a wonderful piece in today's Miami Herald about humanitarian efforts there and in other Central American countries. And yet this is just, Katie, a dilemma that is just got to be resolved in Nicaragua. Because Daniel Ortega, the president, is very close to the Castros. Nicaragua has gotten doctors from Cuba. I don't know what their real reason is, but how does this impasse get solved?
Well, Nicaragua has, as you said, incredibly warm ties with Cuba, and Nicaragua saying, stop, you cannot come into our nation to be able to cross over. There's been 30,000 undocumented Cubans, an 80% increase in 2015 than in 2014 that have presented themselves at the Mexican-U.S. border. They have to cross 5,000 miles and 8 borders to get to the United States. They broke down talks just about a week ago. They all met together and they tried to have a conversation, and it got absolutely nowhere. So now you have 3,000 Cubans that cannot go anywhere, that are really imposing a burden on Costa Rica, and Costa Rica saying, what do you want me to do about it? But it's as a result of the normalization, or people are saying, the potential normalization between the United States and Cuba.
Well, it's a result of the fear of what's coming next, which is changing the rules, getting rid of wet foot, dry foot,
Right.
and getting rid of some of these
The Cuban
automatic
Adjustment
benefits.
Act.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And getting rid of some of these automatic benefits once they reach the promised land of USA.
Right.
And that might be happening, and in some cases, some people, and I feel that it should be happening. So again, it's just a function of timing. They want to get in before the gate closes.
Right.
Well, and the rules are changing as we speak. And this week, Ecuador is now, it was a place where Cubans could travel without a visa, which is why this is happening through Ecuador. And now the Ecuadorian government is requiring a visa. So you saw in Havana, the video that we're looking at right now, people who have plane tickets to Ecuador from Cuba, from Havana, stormed the embassy there, wondering what to do. I mean, this is a very unusual outburst in Havana.
Nancy, in today's paper, there is a very good op-ed by Congressman Carlos Curbelo, who says, let's fix the Cuban Adjustment Act and stop the abusers, but keep the act and make it work.
Absolutely. And, you know, I do think that the Cubans who are protesting, who are storming the embassies in Havana and who are still fleeing, do sense a bit of a crack in the solid wall that, up until normalization, would keep the Cuban Adjustment Act in place. And Curbelo is among others, Ileana, who is saying, you know, we do need to take a second look at this. What Curbelo was talking about was the number of Cubans who are able to come here and take advantage of getting benefits, and who go back and forth.
A lot of them.
Absolutely.
There have been a lot.
And go back and forth to Cuba.
An op-ed this week that appeared in the Herald where I cited, you know, widespread abuse, especially when it comes to Medicare.
Exactly. Yeah.
And also some elderly Cubans. The Sun Sentinel did a great series.
Our investigative team, kudos to them, because they exposed a lot of these abuses.
Exactly.
And but again, the double standards are interesting. You know, we don't hear a lot from Governor Scott talking about, oh, we have to prevent Cuban immigrants from coming into our state because they're going to be abusing our economy or, you know, ripping off the government. But we hear a lot from him about, you know, the Syrian refugees and their potential threats. So why is this? Well, I think anybody could tell you why.
Expediency. I just like that everyone is so comfortable with Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen that we just kind of talk about her as Ileana.
Ileana.
She appreciates that.
I mean, she's been around a while, right?
Yeah. So you have a piece coming out on the third year of Obamacare.
Today's print edition, for people who still read print and online now, wrote about, we're heading into year 3 of the Obamacare enrollment, and we're also heading into the final year of Obama the president. And just where things are at, and
where are they?
Well, here's where we're at. No matter how you get your health insurance, whether it's through the federal exchange, healthcare.gov with a subsidy, whether it's through your employer, whether it's on your own through private insurance that's not on the Obamacare site, you're paying more and you're getting less, you're getting squeezed, benefits are being reduced, the co-pays and deductibles are going up. So overall, our health insurance system is still pretty messed up. And people, you know, to call it the Affordable Care Act when it's not so affordable, well, that's turning out to be a little bit of a misnomer, or a lot of a misnomer, as I found. And number two is that the whole, you know, I think the biggest political lie of this decade has come from President Obama's mouth. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. That has not been the case, and that's coming back to bite the Democrats hard. And that's where we're at with this whole thing.
Did you find any successes of the enormous amount of people who had no insurance finally having some coverage?
The counter argument is yes, you know, getting.
But are they keeping coverage?
Expanding the coverage so that they can't exclude pre-existing. That's good stuff, and we have a lot more Floridians. 1.2 million more Floridians have health insurance today, but some people are dropping off. Nationally, the figure was like over 11 million enrolled who previously didn't have health care. Now it's under 10 because people are not keeping up with the premiums.
They're not paying the premiums. There's about 400,000 people that had to drop coverage because they couldn't verify that they were legal residents of the United States.
Are you surprised you don't hear more about that from the candidates from election 2016 yet?
Not yet. I think they're still just battling Trump, and I don't think that
too.
Exactly, and I don't think the Democrats want to really go there.
We're going to get there. The Republicans.
Hillary has been there in 1992.
Yeah, right.
And boy, she paid a price for it.
Still feels the scars.
We are out of time. Thank you all for coming in. Great to have you here. What a round table.
Thank you.
All right, world leaders are on their way to Paris today. The United Nations Conference on Climate Change is about to get underway there under very tight security. We will have a full report from Paris next. World leaders, including President Obama, are on their way to Paris today. They're going to be there to attempt to forge a global agreement on climate change.
And because that long-planned meeting follows the terrorist attacks there, what was to be tight security is now unprecedented. Jim Bitterman reports.
A wind turbine has sprouted in the middle of the Avenue Champs-Élysées. A planetary globe has appeared in the middle of the Environmental Ministry. Paris seems as if it's being paved over with solar panels, and the city is awash in displays and innovations. Gerard d'Auberville, who has single-handedly rowed boats across both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, sailed up the River Seine with what is said to be the world's largest solar-powered ocean-going vessel.
I think the key of the climate is mostly into the oceans, so I'm very pleased to bring here in Paris a little bit of the sea.
For the tens of thousands of others like d'Auberville drawn to Paris for the coming 2 weeks, this is make or break time for climate change. Later will be too late, say the signs atop the French Foreign Ministry. As the foreign minister himself knows, trying to get the nations of the world to agree on anything is a tall order. And never before in France, or perhaps anywhere, have there been negotiations quite like these. Starting Monday, 195 countries will gather at a purpose-built conference center at Le Bourget Airport north of Paris to try to find agreement on worldwide limitations on greenhouse gases. But the complex negotiations were nearly overshadowed by the vicious terrorist attacks in Paris 2 weeks ago, which at first seemed as if they might endanger the meetings here. In fact, some people felt that the climate talks should be called off.
I'm not convinced about the necessity at this moment to organize this event. I think we have other priorities today, even if the environment is very important.
But for most, those worldwide issues trump even terrorist concerns. In a way, the Paris conference is just too big to call off. Everyone from the Pope on down has emphasized how important it is for the planet to concentrate on the climate issue. President Hollande said just a few days ago that the best response to the terrorist attacks is to carry on with the climate summit. But protecting the nearly 150 heads of state and 40,000 delegates who are expected will be a real challenge for French security forces. 2,800 police and army will patrol the site itself. 8,000 more will reinforce French borders. In all, 120,000 security personnel will be mobilized across the country. The leaders will only attend for the first 2 days of the conference, but miles of roads will have to be closed off to get them to and from the conference site, something that is expected to throw normally impossible French traffic into chaos. But with popular demonstrations and serious negotiations, the climate conference will go on. It's something the world's leaders feel simply cannot be postponed any longer.
That was Jim Bitterman reporting from Paris. As you saw in advance of that meeting, thousands are rallying across Europe, urging world leaders to act on climate change.
All right, still to come, my personal perspective about the rise of Donald Trump. Why is he the guy leading the polls? On to the weather. Here is a beautiful shot from our Key West cam. Whoa, looks great down there.
And here is Weather Authority meteorologist Jennifer Correa with your Sunday forecast.
Good afternoon, Glenna and Michael. Yes, absolutely gorgeous across Key West with sunny skies. Temperatures are already hitting those low 80s. Some of us are still in the upper 70s, including down in the Keys with a breeze out of the northeast, up to 18 miles per hour wind speed in Homestead, 15 for Miami, Fort Lauderdale. On the radar, just tracking a couple of showers just to the southeast of the Keys. We continue with a northeast flow as we head into tomorrow. Not as breezy, though, because winds will start to subside, especially by Tuesday. An east wind will be back, and it'll be light. It'll help us to warm up. Also, by the way, tomorrow is the last day of hurricane season for the Atlantic Ocean. So last day tomorrow and last day of November, which leads us into a warm, at least first week of December, with temperatures getting back into those mid-80s by the middle part of the week. Michael?
Jennifer, thanks. All right, before we leave you, a personal perspective about Donald Trump. I was wrong about him. A few months ago, I said he was going to be a shooting star fun to watch as he burned out, but he didn't. I also said he was something like a summer romance that we would get over, but we haven't. So here we are, almost in December. Donald Trump is #1 in the polls. About 4,000 Trump supporters attended a rally yesterday in Sarasota. He fed them a lot of red meat that they came to hear, personal attacks and phony claims. Trump has succeeded because his supporters say he tells it like it is. He's unfiltered, uninhibited, shoots from the hip. But what he is hitting with his rhetorical potshots is truth. Trump is just factually wrong about so many of the things he says. Thousands of Arabs on 9/11 in New Jersey were supposedly cheering as they watched the Twin Towers come down. Really? Nobody in New Jersey says that ever happened. And this week, Trump ridiculed a reporter who 14 years ago reported vaguely that maybe it had. That reporter, now with the New York Times, has a physical disability, and Trump mimicked it as he ridiculed the reporter. Ugly. Also this week, Trump said a black protester who came to a rally and got beaten up probably deserved it. In addition, Trump sent out a list of trumped up, as it were, crime statistics that had blacks killing whites at a ridiculously high rate, which simply is not true. This week, he also said he favors waterboarding suspected terrorists, whether they are guilty or not. In other words, just go ahead and torture people. How does Trump get away with this stuff? These ugly, racist, untrue assertions. It's partly because it's we in the media who are pointing out his airs of fact, at which point Trump supporters turn around and say, oh, it's just the lamestream media getting their knickers in a twist. I get it. You don't like us much. That's okay. What's not okay is swallowing racist, fascist BS from a man who wants to lead this country and the free world. Donald Trump is not qualified to be that leader. He's more than qualified to sell condos or be a reality TV star, but President of the United States, no. Emphatically no. Trump is not the first demagogue we have seen. He won't be the last, but he is ours for the moment. He's riding high because he's tapped into deep anger over dysfunctional Washington and the annoying impulse for politicians and other people to be politically correct. We understand. We get it. But it's time for those who applaud Donald Trump to take a step back. Time for all of us to look hard at what he says and hold him accountable for factual errors and outright lies. That is my perspective. I hope you have a great Sunday. Remember, as always, stay informed get involved.
The phone's ringing. I think Donald Trump's on the line for you.
I'd be more than happy to speak with him.
Well, what do you think? We invite you, as always, to weigh in on that or any topic you like. Email, Facebook, Twitter. Here are all of our addresses. We are very easy to find.
And we like to talk to you, and go Dolphins. Let's beat those nasty Jets.
Have a great Sunday. Nasty.